Have you ever walked into a room and suddenly become unusually aware of yourself? You notice how you're standing. You wonder whether your clothes look right. You start thinking about what your face is doing, how your voice sounds, or whether the last thing you said came across the way you intended. Maybe you're speaking during a meeting and part of your attention is focused on what you're saying, while the other part is observing yourself as you speak. Or you post something online and find yourself checking it again and again, imagining how different people might interpret it. It can feel as though everyone is paying close attention to you, even when no one said anything at all. This can show up in ways that seem completely unrelated. You may hold back in an idea at work and later wish you had spoken up. Someone compliments your appearance or something you accomplished, and you immediately minimize it. You may stay quiet in a marriage, friendship, or family relationship until years of unspoken frustration finally come out all at once. Sometimes one careless comment from someone who is having a bad day can affect how you see yourself for years to come. These experiences look different, but they can all grow from the same automatic habit of managing how visible you allow yourself to be. Hi, I'm Jasmin Braithwaite, a certified hypnotherapist. On this channel, we explore how the mind works, why we develop certain habits and tendencies, and how hypnosis and hypnotherapy can help us create meaningful, lasting change. Let's get started. Today, we're talking about why it can feel like everyone is watching you. This experience can show up as self consciousness, perfectionism, or the habit of carefully monitoring yourself around other people. You may hold back an opinion, avoid drawing attention to yourself, or spend more time thinking about how you appeared than what was actually happening. Once you understand what your attention is doing in those times, the experience can begin to make more sense. From a, from a hypnotherapy perspective, self monitoring can be understood as an automatic response your mind learned over time. Your attention turns inward because your mind is trying to help you manage how you're being seen. And when you begin recognizing that response as a habit instead of treating it as a fixed part of your identity, you can create more room to participate, express yourself, and stay connected to the moment. Imagine you're about to leave your house and suddenly you notice something about your appearance. Maybe there's a small stain on your shirt. Maybe your hair isn't cooperating that day, or as they say, bad hair day. Or you notice something on your face that you hadn't seen before. The moment you notice it, your attention can lock into it. Now it seems obvious. It feels as though everyone else will notice it immediately the same way you did, even though most people are likely focused mainly on themselves and if they're experiencing something similar. Or maybe you walk into a room and suddenly you become more aware of your own voice. You wonder whether there's a sound, you wonder whether you sound different. You start thinking about whether you're walking normally, what your hands are doing, or whether your expression looks natural. Nothing may have actually changed. Your attention has simply turned inwards. When your attention becomes narrowly focused on one detail, that detail can start to feel much larger and more noticeable than it is to anyone else. You're experiencing yourself from the inside. You can feel every shift in your body in those moments. You can hear every change in your voice. You know the thoughts running through your mind. Other people, they don't have access to all that information. They see a brief moment while they're also thinking about their own clothes, their own voice, their own responsibilities, what they want to say next, or what they need to do later. Most people aren't carefully observing you. They're likely focused mainly on themselves. But when your mind is monitoring you closely, it can create the feeling that everyone else must be doing the same thing. That feeling can follow you throughout an entire interaction. Part of your attention stays on the conversation, while another part of you watches how you're performing in it. You listen to your tone. You notice how long you paused. You study the other person's face for a reaction. You may wonder whether you said too much, not enough, or something that could have been taken the wrong way. Later in the interaction, you may continue in your mind. You may replay a sentence, remember a look on someone's face. You think of a better way you could have answered. The other person may have moved on completely with their day without giving the conversation another thought. Meanwhile, your mind is still reviewing it as though there's something important to solve in that very moment. This kind of self monitoring can become so automatic that you probably don't even notice it anymore. It may feel like you're simply being careful, thoughtful, or prepared. But underneath that carefulness, your mind may be trying to prevent the discomfort from being misunderstood, criticized, embarrassed, or rejected. From a hypnotherapy perspective, this kind of self monitoring can make sense as a learned protective response. At some point earlier in life, your mind may have been connected to being noticed with the possibility of criticism, embarrassment, rejection, or unwanted attention. That connection may have come from an obvious experience, such as being teased as a child, being publicly corrected, laughed at, or made to feel ashamed. It can also develop more gradually. Maybe you grew up around people who commented frequently on how others looked, spoke, or behaved, or presented themselves. I think they call it people watching. Maybe you grew up with some people watchers. Maybe you learned that certain parts of your personality drew attention you didn't want. Or perhaps the reactions around you felt unpredictable. So watching yourself closely became a way of trying to stay ahead of them. The important thing is to understand that these protective responses usually aren't created overnight. They're often learned over months or years, and you begin operating on autopilot. You probably don't even notice the responses anymore. It can start to feel like part of you, part of your personality, even though it's really a strategy your mind developed a long time ago. Over time, your mind may have learned to scan for anything that could make you stand out. You begin checking your words before you even say them. You study other people's reactions. You try to anticipate what might be misunderstood, criticized, or remembered later. This can create a quiet belief that if you monitor yourself carefully enough, you might be able to prevent an uncomfortable reaction. The intention behind that response is sheerly protection. At all times, your mind is trying to help you avoid discomfort and pain. It does that by helping you avoid the things it learned long ago might put you at risk. It does this throughout the day without you even noticing it anymore. And that's that automatic response I mentioned earlier. But when that protective response continues in situations where the same level of caution is no longer needed, ordinary visibility can start to feel risky. Being asked a question, sharing an opinion, entering a new space, or simply drawing attention from a moment may activate the same careful monitoring. And because these responses can become automatic, you may not consciously think, I need to protect myself right now. You may simply feel tense, exposed, or overly aware of yourself, or suddenly unsure of what to say. When being seen feels risky, the mind often starts trying to control how visible you are. Sometimes that control looks like a shrinking moment. A person may speak more quietly than they naturally would. Maybe they might soften their opinion or wait for someone else to speak up first, or maybe never even speak up at all. In a meeting, for example, you may know exactly what you want to say, but hesitate long enough for someone else to share a similar idea, and when everyone responds positively to them, you're left wishing you had trusted yourself enough to speak up to begin with. The same tendency can show up in personal situations too. For example, someone compliments you on a job well done, your new hairstyle, or an outfit you're wearing. Instead of simply accepting the compliment, you immediately minimize it. Oh, that was no big deal. This is nothing special. I just threw this together. No big deal. I've had this thing for years. And the attention feels uncomfortable, so your mind tries to move it away as quickly as possible. The same thing can happen with accomplishments, excitement, needs, or preferences. They get downplayed, not because they don't matter, but because allowing yourself to be fully seen can feel more emotionally exposing. This tendency can also shape marriages, friendships, and family relationships. When someone regularly avoids speaking up, the other person may never fully understand what they need, what's hurting them, or what they disagree with. The other person may never fully know you. The relationship can become unbalanced because one person is expressing themselves while the other is continually adjusting, accommodating, or just staying quiet. The feelings don't disappear simply because they're not spoken out loud. Frustration, hurt, and resentment can build over time. Then one day, the person may react with intensity that seems sudden to everyone around them, even though the feelings have been accumulating for years. What looks like an unexpected explosion may actually be the release of many conversations that never happened. This is another way fear of being seen can actually become costly. Speaking honestly can feel exposing in the moment, while continually holding everything in can actually affect the health of the relationship and the emotional well being of the person who has been staying silent. Over time, a person can become very skilled at adjusting themselves to the room. Their body language changes, their personality becomes more restrained. They try to present the version of themselves that seems least likely to attract criticism. For some people, this becomes perfectionism. Before speaking, sharing, applying, creating, or introducing themselves, they feel pressure to remove every possible reason someone might question or misunderstand them. That can mean revising an email long after it already says what it needs to say. It can mean delaying a project because one small detail still feels unfinished. It can also mean waiting to post the video, apply for the opportunity, start that business, or have the conversation until they feel completely 100% prepared. Even ordinary conversations can become mentally rehearsed in advance. The mind starts imagining how the other person might respond and preparing several versions of an answer in an effort to avoid being caught off guard. The result is a very narrow set of conditions under which visibility feels acceptable. Speaking feels acceptable only if there's no mistake. Sharing feels acceptable only if there's no misunderstanding. Expression feels acceptable only if the reaction can be predicted. Those conditions are almost impossible to guarantee. Being visible means allowing people to see a real person. A real person may pause, change their mind, become excited, need clarification, stumble over their words, like I've done a couple times in this video, or express something another person sees differently. None of that removes their ability, intelligence, or worth. But when the mind has learned to connect visibly with emotional risk, it may keep encouraging, waiting, editing, rehearsing, downplaying, or staying in the background. That protective habit can gradually limit experiences a person is fully capable of handling. The issue isn't a lack of ability, the mind is simply working very hard to prevent the discomfort of being seen imperfectly. People who struggle with being seen often most feel comfortable most feel comfortable around others who experience the same thing, kind of like attracts like. There can be a sense of relief in being around people who also prefer to stay in the background, avoid attention, or think carefully before they speak. Everyone understands the unspoken pressure, so no one has to explain why the visibility feels uncomfortable. And that kind of connection can feel supportive, for sure. And sometimes it genuinely is. A lot of times it genuinely is, actually. But it can also create an environment where the same habits keep getting reinforced. If everyone in the group holds back, overthinks, downplays themselves, avoids situations where they might stand out, those behaviors can begin to feel like the safest and most reasonable way to move through the world. The group may never directly say being seen as dangerous. They're not going to say that out loud. But the shared habits can still send the message. And when a person spends most of their time around people who who respond to visibility in the same way, there may be fewer opportunities for the mind to learn that speaking up, expressing enthusiasm, being imperfect, or allowing attention can also lead to connection, encouragement, and positive experiences. This can become especially noticeable when one person begins to change. They may start speaking up more openly, talking talking up more space, taking up more space, sharing their ideas, trying new things, or allowing themselves to be seen in ways they once avoided. That change can affect the relationships around them. Some people may feel uncomfortable because the person is no longer following the same unspoken rules and protocols. They may question the change, criticize it, or pull away completely. In other cases, no one openly rejects anyone. The relationships simply begin to feel different because the people involved are no longer growing in the same direction. That can be painful, especially when the group that once felt like a place of safety and understanding becomes something different. But growing apart doesn't always mean someone has done something wrong. Sometimes it means a person is no longer organizing their life around the same fears, limits, or protective habits that once shaped the relationship. One of the most freeing things to understand is that everyone sees the world through their own eyes. Even when someone notices you, they aren't experiencing you the same way you experience yourself. They're seeing you through the lens of their own personality, experiences and beliefs, expectations, and emotional state in those moments. Have you ever noticed that when you tell someone something about yourself, they often respond from their own viewpoint? You might say, I prefer to eat chicken, and the other person immediately responds and says, well, I prefer turkey. But the conversation wasn't about what they prefer, was it? You were simply sharing something about yourself. The same thing can happen when someone shows a friend a dress that they're excited about or a new outfit. Instead of saying, that looks great on you, or simply celebrating that you found something that they like, the friend says, oh, I'd never be caught dead in that dress. Again, the conversation shifts away from the person who is sharing and back towards the other person's preferences. So, yeah, people naturally look for ways to relate to one another, and that's okay. They find something similar in our own experience. It can help us feel connected, safer, and more accepted. Sometimes that response is helpful, but sometimes, and someone shares something, and we mention a similar experience in a way that lets them know they're understood. But other times, that same tendency can turn into a moment of that normally turns into a moment of connection, turns into comparison, judgment, or dismissal. And this happens all the time. I'm sure you all have experienced it from one point or another. You tell someone about a decision you made, an experience you had, or something you enjoy, and their first response is to compare it with what they would do, how they would feel, or what they would choose. That doesn't necessarily mean they aren't listening or that they don't care. It shows how naturally people process information through their own experiences, preferences, memories, and emotions. Remember, I said people see things through their own eyes. So sometimes they immediately respond and say, after you say you like chicken, they're processing, okay, what do I like? I like turkey. And that's a response. Instead of saying, thank you for letting me know. Next time you come over, I'll make sure that chicken is on the menu. They immediately say that they like turkey. And it's just, it may not be bad. And we're used to these things. But as I'm saying, it's an example of how people look at things through their own eyes and how they feel in those moments. As I said, if they're having a bad day, that response about the outfit, oh, I'd never be caught dead in that. I hope I'm making sense to you all. So even when the conversation is about you, they're still hearing it through the filter of themselves to close that thought process. Their emotional state also matters more than your emotional state. Their emotional state also matters more than people often realize. As I mentioned, when someone is angry, they may interpret what you say through that anger. Their response may be sharper, more critical, or more impatient than it would have been on another day. When someone is sad, overwhelmed, insecure, or already feeling rejected, they may hear something in your words that you never even intended. And I'm sure you guys experienced that. You know you said one thing, but because they were so frustrated or upset, they literally think they heard something else. It's pretty common actually. A neutral comment may feel dismissive. A pause may feel like disapproval. A small mistake may seem more important than it actually is. People don't stop experiencing their own emotions when they interact with you. Those emotions affect what they notice, what they assume, and how they respond. That means someone can react strongly to you for reasons that you have very little to do with. They may be carrying stress from work, tension from another relationship, financial pressures, grief, exhaustion, anger about something that happened earlier in that day. I think I've explained this a million ways now to bring it home that sometimes when people are critical, it has nothing to do with you, and it may not be worth internalizing. Yeah. So the emotions come out the emotions of people come out when you're talking. Period. Right. And perhaps most importantly, someone who has just been criticized may turn around and direct that same critical energy towards someone else. It may not even be coming towards you. They may do that to everybody that day. It's just that that person being close to you in your life, it affects you differently than someone else who's like, yeah, whatever. Sometimes I wonder if laughing things off would be the healthier thing to do in certain cases, right? And they could have just had a difficult conversation with a parent or a spouse, supervisor, or someone else in their life, and they may already feel embarrassed, inadequate, or angry or dismissive. And that makes me think about that phrase, you never know what someone is going through when you speak to them. So, they always say speak with kindness, and I guess that's us doing our part, but um depending on the conversation, it could also affect you negatively. And a lot of times we take things personally, but maybe there's certain things that we don't have to take so personally because it's not even about us personally, right? So, that example of walking into a room with a new outfit and feeling good, them responding to you instead of from a calm and peaceful place, and that saying that why you're wearing it, comment, it can cause you to question yourself. For them, it may be one careless thing, but at the end of the day, not taking it personally can avoid you questioning yourself. It's just something to think about. Um, because for some people, it's a moment where they stop wearing certain clothes forever, and they become more self-conscious about their body or begin to question whether they know how to present themselves at all. That's the opposite of not taking it personally. They may forget the comment that happened completely and just, it may have sparked such a strong emotion in them of rejection that certain types of outfits, they never wear it again. And it's amazing if just from one person having a bad day and giving you a response that wasn't really about you can affect you. And it happens to us all the time, especially like during our childhood days when the things the kids in our class say to us really stick. Just thought to mention that. And your mind could carry these things forward for years. One person's comment of pain can become another person's lifelong belief about themselves. Sometimes it helps to realize that that comment that stayed with you may have been said more about what the person was carrying on that day than what it said about you. People carry things, you know, um, and it could have been interpreted completely different by two different people. While we're over here being caught up in our emotions, someone else may have laughed it off. They may have walked down the block and said the same thing to someone else about their outfit too. And that person may have had a different perspective and just laughed at them right in their face, you know? So it's just a perspective to think about. One person may think you're confident, and another person might think you're quiet. Someone else may barely remember those interactions at all. And that doesn't make one person's interaction the correct version over yours and who you are. It just means people naturally understand what they see through the filter of their own minds, pretty much at all times. And the same is true for you. When you assume someone is judging you, your mind is making a prediction based on what it has learned before. Our minds are always predicting things. Sometimes that prediction may be accurate, and many times it isn't. A facial expression may have nothing to do with you. A short response may reflect someone else's stress, distraction, or personality. Even a critical reaction can be shaped by that person's expectations or insecurities, their past experiences or emotional state in those moments. This becomes especially important after you've spent years adjusting yourself to other people. As you begin speaking more openly, expressing preferences, setting your boundaries, or allowing yourself to be more seen fully, some people may respond differently. Their reaction doesn't automatically mean that the change is wrong. It may mean that they had grown accustomed to a version of you who stayed quiet, accommodating, made yourself more easier for them to understand. So they just may not understand this newer version of you versus the past version. And even when someone does form an opinion about you, that opinion isn't the same as your worth. And if they base an opinion on you based on your past version, it's invalid at this point because you've changed. So if something isn't valid, should you value it? Just something to think about there. Your value isn't determined by someone else's interpretation of you. Understanding this doesn't mean you'll immediately stop caring what other people think. That's a natural thing. These tendencies can operate automatically and may continue even after you understand them consciously. But it can help you begin separating another person's reaction from the meaning your mind assigned to it. Their response came through their emotions, experiences, and perspective. It was never an objective definition of you. By this point, you may understand why the tendencies have developed and recognize many of the ways it has been showing up in your life. That understanding matters, of course. It can bring relief, reduce self-blame, and help experiences that once felt disconnected begin to make sense. But people often already know they're holding back. They know that they're overthinking what they say. They know they minimize themselves and rehearse conversations, avoid conflict, or care way too much about how they're being perceived. Knowing hasn't hasn't necessarily stopped the response. That's because these tendencies often operate on autopilot. They were built through memory, repetition, emotional experiences, and the mind's ongoing effort to avoid discomfort. By the time you consciously realize what's happening, the automatic response may already be underway. Your body may be tense. You may notice a little shoulder tightening, or maybe you're gripping your hands or, tapping that foot, knocking, like rocking your leg a little bit, lifting your heel up and, pulsing the heel up and down, turning inward. Your mind may begin holding back before you've made a conscious decision to do so. Trying to correct every automatic response consciously can become exhausting. It asks you to monitor yourself even more closely, which unintentionally may reinforce the same habit of constantly watching yourself. Fortunately, there is something that can help. Hypnosis offers a different way of working with the tendency. Hypnosis is a state of focused attention where much of the noise, mental chatter, and stress of the day can begin to quiet down. You're still aware, you can still hear what's being said, and you remain in control with fewer distractions competing for your attention. It can become easier to focus and rehearse thoughts and images, suggestions, and responses connected to the change you want to see. Hypnosis can be likened to the if you've ever been in a moment where you're watching a movie and you could be at home, you're just watching TV and you're so focused that your phone might be ringing or someone may be trying to flag you down. And at first, the first few times you don't even hear it because you have a narrowed focus attention, as I mentioned in what hypnosis is, on whatever it is you're watching. And eventually you hear the person. And that's like into the same effect as I said, you're still in control. You decide how deeply focused you want to be when in hypnotherapy. So that focused rehearsal that happens while you're in hypnosis. And your hypnotherapist brings you techniques to learn how to get into that focused state. It can help the mind begin to build new, more helpful habits instead of automatically repeating the old ones over and over again. A hypnotherapist may help someone explore the meaning of their mind attached to being noticed, criticized, misunderstood, or emotionally exposed. So the work may also involve helping the mind separate an old experience from the present. A comment made years ago may still be influencing how someone dresses, speaks, participates, or relates to other people. The memory remains part of their history, while the emotional meaning of an automatic response connected to it may be able to change. Guided imagery and mental rehearsal can also give the mind new experiences to practice during hypnosis. Someone may imagine speaking in a meeting while remaining connected to what they want to say. They may rehearse receiving a compliment without immediately minimizing it. They may picture expressing a need calmly in a relationship instead of holding it until the emotion becomes overwhelming. These imagined experiences can help the mind begin building new expectations around visibility and being seen gradually, becoming connected with participation, connection, honesty, creativity, and the ability to handle another person's response. The change may appear in ordinary moments. You may speak before you've edited the sentence 5 times in your mind. You accept a compliment and allow it to land. You express a preference without immediately explaining it or defending it. You may still notice some self consciousness, of course, but the old response no longer has the control. It doesn't have to control the entire experience. The good news is that the mind can learn from new experiences just as it learned from the old ones. And hypnosis can support that learning at the level where many of these habits, memories, and automatic responses have been operating all along, the subconscious mind. If you see yourself in this episode, I hope one thing stands out. Many of these tendencies didn't develop because something was wrong with you. They developed because your mind was doing what it does every day. It was learning from experience, building habits, and trying to protect you from discomfort or emotional pain. The challenge is that your mind can continue using those same protective habits long after they've stopped being useful and helpful. That's why simply understanding these tendencies doesn't always make them disappear because they've been on autopilot. Hypnosis gives us an opportunity to work with those habits where they've been operating all along. As much of the noise, the mental chatter, and stress of the day begins to quiet down during the hypnosis session, it becomes easier to focus and rehearse new ways of thinking, feeling, and responding. Over time, those new responses can become more helpful habits. Maybe one day you'll walk into a room without wondering who's watching you. You'll simply walk into the room. Maybe you'll share an idea without editing it 5 times first. Maybe you'll receive a compliment and simply say, "Thank you." Maybe you'll stop experiencing your life from the outside looking in and start experiencing it as yourself. If you found value in today's conversation, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel. I share weekly content on hypnosis, personal growth, and practical ways to create meaningful change. I'm currently accepting new hypnosis clients. If you'd like to schedule a personal session with me, you'll find my booking information in the description below. Thanks for spending this time with me, and I'll see you in the next episode.